Episode 2, The Memoirs of the Clouded Kokoro. The Clouded Heart, that is.
の歩道で起こった姿なき犯人による冬の夜の惨劇。背中を刺され倒れた裏若きレディーが生死をさまよううちに事件は解決した。窮地に陥った東洋人の留学生が我が友人によって救い出されたその晩、ガス灯の刻むほの暗い影の中、再び奇怪な事件が闇を切り裂いた。当時の新聞の戦場的な見出しを記憶している者も多いだろう。悪霊に見入られた死の邸宅、死刑囚の呪い、ガス魔人の恐怖。現場に駆けつけた名探偵は瞬時にその真相を看破するのだが、それは悲劇の舞台の幕開けを告げるプレリュードに過ぎなかったのである。
My name is Ryunosuke Naruhodo. I'm a fledgling lawyer just starting out on my journey. 6 months ago, I arrived as a visiting student of law, having made the long voyage across the sea from the Empire of Japan to here, London, England. And on the way, in quite extraordinary circumstances, I made the acquaintance of a world-famous detective. Currently, I reside in the attic of the detective's own lodgings, from where I run my legal consultancy of sorts. I've successfully defended a number of clients in Britain's highest court, the Old Bailey. But since a particularly grueling and unforgettable legal battle 4 months ago now, I haven't returned to the courtroom. In truth, I lost my right to return. But that epic trial was just one small part of an epic tale, a tale which was now about to awaken from slumber. Thanks to a letter that arrived this morning from my homeland. What a delicious smell wafting up the stairs. It must be nearly time for breakfast. I better go down to Mr. Sholmes' suite and say good morning to the great detective and his flatmate. "30th August, 7:28 a.m. Sholmes' suite."
Ah, Runu, good. I was just about to call up to you. The bacon's ready.
Good morning, Iris. It smells delicious as usual. Before we eat, though, I have some news. I had a surprise this morning. Shh! Not another word, Mr. Naruhodo. This could be just the abstruse thing for my pre-breakfast stagnation-repelling mental stimulation, my dear fellow. Morning to you, too, Mr. Sholmes. Ah, yes. I see. So that's it. The truth is as clear to me as day. My faculties of observation have revealed it again. What are you talking about? You, Mr. Naruhodo, you have this very morning met with a surprise. Well, is that not the case? Really, my dear fellow, it barely warrants explanation. Firstly, your hair is particularly unkempt, somewhat reminiscent of a bird's nest. Secondly, you have neglected to fasten the third button of your jacket. Clearly, when considered together, these two facts point to you having been flustered this morning. Can I talk now? But of course. Though I don't look for admiration, you understand. My hair always looks like this. It's been this way since I first met you. Oh, it has. And the button was ripped off last night, if you remember. By you.
Hurley pulled your button off?
Ah, yes, I recall the incident now. It was after supper, was it not? As the evening advanced, I picked up my violin and began playing the wailing notes of a haunting tune. But then, to my utter dismay, the third string snapped. Why did it have to happen? Why? Little wonder, then, that in my vexation, I grabbed the first button I saw and ripped it from its proper place. Well, I'd like it back now, please. It's troubling me that I can't fasten my jacket. And it's troubling me that you expect me to know where it is. Somewhere thereabouts on the floor, one presumes. Helpful. What matters at the present time, my dear fellow, is simply whether or not my deduction was unerring.
But Hurley, Rona said it when he came in, didn't he? I had a surprise this morning.
Well, that really is a surprise. Yes, this man is the pride of the British Empire, the famous consulting detective, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. There can't be a single person in the world who doesn't know his name.
All right then, enough of this silly conversation. Come and eat this bacon before it goes cold. And I have a new herbal tea for you to try too. My latest special blend.
And here we have Iris Wilson, Mr. Sholmes' lodger and companion. A truly exceptional young girl who is the author of a highly successful serialization here in London. Yes, The Adventure of Sherlock Holmes, as published in the Rance magazine. So, Mr. Naruhodo, won't you put us out of all misery? What surprised you this fine morning? Ah, well, I received a letter from Japan.
Oh, from Susie, you mean? Was it? Really?
That's right. And she had some rather startling news, in fact. Ah, intriguing indeed. You must tell us about it over breakfast.
Oh yes, what fun!
They just switched the first letters of his name, very creative. Oh yeah, this is, right now we're the real Naruhodo, so, the main character. We can go to the court record and probably observe. This is his armband that, identifies him as a lawyer in Japan. And then, this is Susato, what she really looks like. I guess my photo is not here, the main character guy. But yeah, let's read these really quick, just for fun. Susato Mikotoba, a judicial assistant sent to Britain on a study tour. She's the epitome of a refined Japanese lady and a huge help to me always. Iris Wilson, an extraordinary young girl who lives with Mr. Sholmes. She has a degree in medicine and is the author of a popular series of short stories published in a prominent magazine. Sherlock Holmes. There's not a person in the world who hasn't heard of this famous great detective whose deductions never fail to surprise. Armband. An armband I inherited from Kazuma. It identifies the wearer as a defense lawyer throughout the Empire of Japan. But yeah, you'll see what we look like, shortly, I'm sure. Miss Susato's letter. This is a letter that arrived from Japan this morning, by international post.
Oh, how lovely! Look at Susie's beautiful writing. I wish I could read it.
And how is your judicial assistant faring, I may ask? She's very well, thank you. In fact, according to what she's written, she actually appeared as a lawyer at the Japanese Supreme Court and won a case.
Oh, really? Oh, isn't she wonderful?
A cut above your good self, my dear fellow. I've won cases too, you know. Apparently, Mr. Natsume appeared in the trial as a witness. Natsume. No, I don't recall that name. Of course you do. We helped the man twice. You know, in those 2 cases that took place on Briar Road 6 months ago? Ah, the mustached twitchy man, with the somewhat feline eyes and the mustache.
He didn't have 2 mustaches, Hurley.
Yes, who could forget those 2 cases? They made a very deep impression on me. Although I must confess, the details are a little hazy now. A very deep impression they made on you, clearly. So, what was this startling news penned by Miss Susato? Do you remember the case of the haunted lodgings, Mr. Sholmes? Ah, yes. It's very interesting, you know. I don't feel entirely uncertain that a case of that nature did not occur. He's totally forgotten then. Anyway, in her letter, Miss Susato asked that we read over her case notes again and investigate further. Though it took place half a year ago. For what purpose? Because of something that Mr. Natsume said to her, apparently. He suggested that the real reason why she was called back to Japan so suddenly might have something to do with that case of the haunted lodgings. Oh? When Mr. Natsume returned to Japan, Miss Susato's father questioned him about the case, she says. And something Mr. Natsume said appeared to trouble Professor Mikotoba, prompting him to send that telegram.
Oh, that case, yes. It was very strange, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I compiled the whole story into a nice, neat manuscript ready for publication too. But then Hurley here was all funny about it, remember? He was very mean. That story must not be published, you said. Very mysteriously as well.
Really? I said that. Are you sure? Do you perhaps know something about it as well, Mr. Sholmes? About why Miss Susato was suddenly told 4 months ago that she had to return to Japan?
It's been 4 months now since we waved Susie off at Dover. It was such a shock, wasn't it? The way she just suddenly announced that she had to go back to Japan.
Indeed it was, due to a telegram she received from her homeland, I believe. That's right, telling her to return urgently. Yes, because her father had passed away. No. It was just said that he was suffering from a high fever, the cause of which was unknown. He's not dead. But according to this letter, that news about her father's fever was just a ruse.
A ruse? So Susie's daddy lied to her so that she'd make the voyage back home. Why would he do that?
I have to admit, I have absolutely no idea. But she believes it's almost certainly related to the case of the haunted lodgings. Summoning her back to Japan so suddenly like that. I wonder what Miss Susato's father is hiding.
Hurley, do you know what it's all about?
Ah, well, who can say? What? But you said... Please, I have engagements, my dear fellow. My calendar is quite surprisingly full today. An astringent analysis of the matter would be excessive, I feel, even if I were quite at leisure. So, man the fort in my absence, won't you, Iris?
I will, Hurley. Don't worry. See you later.
He scuttled off rather quickly there, running away so he doesn't have to tell us the story. I think perhaps Professor Mikotoba isn't the only person hiding something there. Sosuke-san was involved in 2 cases, but only one of them was forbidden from being published. By, of all people, Mr. Sholmes.
Aha! I found them at last.
Iris, are they...
The notes about the case. That's right. Susie and I compiled them together. The case of the haunted lodgings. Do you want to read them, Runa?
Absolutely. Thank you, Iris. I have no idea what secrets could still be hiding in the shadows of this case. Perhaps if I read over the notes again, something might come to light.
That's the spirit.
And so, Iris and I decided to read over the case notes again together. Everything from what happened to our investigation and that fierce battle in court that followed. Reliving every detail. I just need to find a clue. And I have all the time in the world. Because, of course, I'm no longer allowed to practice law in the courts of Great Britain. So I got a couple mysteries there. And I guess this is the first time we are hearing this story. And it wasn't in the first game. It was 6 months ago. A mysterious incident that unfolded on the wintry streets of London. Oh, okay, this is the one. So this was in the first game, but I guess we're gonna go over it right now. A young woman was found lying on the snowy pavement of Briar Road with a knife in her back. Fortunately, her life was spared, but she was unconscious for several days following the incident. The fog was thick, and nobody saw her attack her, but by a cruel twist of fate, a visiting Japanese student was walking behind her at the time, and was duly arrested. That man was Sosuke-san, and the man who effected his arrest was Mr. Sholmes. Believing in our compatriot's innocence, Susato-san and I decided to represent Sosuke-san in court. And, after a grueling trial of many twists and turns, we finally managed to prove his innocence. Joyful, joyous, jubilant jubilation! Was the man's reaction after the trial, but his jubilant jubilation was short-lived. We received a telegram from Mr. Sholmes the following morning. The victim of the Briar Road stabbing has regained consciousness. Hurry to the Barts at once. So Susato-san and I summoned a hansom and headed immediately to the hospital. Oh, okay. So this is the case that happened after. Okay, never mind. I guess this is a new case that we're covering now. Sorry, I thought they were talking about what happened just before. The 21st of February, 5:30 a.m. St. Bartholomew's Hospital, Recovery Ward. There you are at last. Good morning, Mr. Scholz. I think not. Oh. You're late. What on earth took you so long? Your telegram only arrived at 5 o'clock, Mr. Scholz, and it's a 20-minute ride to the hospital. That's right, and it's 5:30 now. I think we made very good time. The time is utterly irrelevant. The fact is, I have been waiting for what has felt like an eternity. Ha. In point of fact, I myself was awoken at 4 this morning by a telegram boy. And feeling it was somewhat unjust that I alone had been roused at such an hour, I sent one to you. Well, thanks for that. Anyway, you're here now, so the victim is over there. She's only just regained consciousness. You should introduce yourselves, and I shall observe from here. So that's the lady who was found on the snow-covered pavement with a knife in her back. Her name is... yes, here we are. Miss Green. Alright. Hello? Good morning. Hello, I'm, Ryunosuke Naruhodo, from the Empire of Japan. Oh no! Oh, was it your knife then? Are you the man who... No. I'm a lawyer. And I'm Susato Mikotoba. Pleased to meet you. Oh no! Was it your knife then? Are you the one? No. I assure you. I'm Mr. Naruhodo's judicial assistant. We heard that you regained consciousness. I wanted to come give you our best wishes. Best wishes? For me? Thank you. I'm Olive Green. I'm an artist. Well, no, that's not right, is it? What I mean is, I'm trying to be an artist. Well, what I really mean is, I desperately want to be an artist. But the truth is, I don't have any talent. I know I don't. It's no wonder I was stabbed in the back. I don't think that's related, actually. Gosh, this young woman seems to bend over backwards to put herself down. Seeing as we're here, we should ask her about what happened from her perspective, I suppose. To suddenly be struck in the back by a blade as you were walking along the pavement. What a terrible experience you had, Miss Green. It was so cold that day, and the fog was so thick, I couldn't see a thing. That was 4 days ago now, I think. Is that right? Yes, that's right. I'm afraid you've been comatose all that time. But the case has been solved, hasn't it? I've been here in the hospital, I mean. Indeed it has, my dear madam. Spectacularly, by none other than I, Herlock Sholmes. Mr. Sholmes, as you well know, it was Mr. Naruhodo's hard work in court that solved the case. Are you yet to hear what happened, Miss Green? Yes, I'm afraid so. A gentleman from the police force is supposed to be coming to fill me in shortly. Oh, I see. Me coming round seems to have made everyone frantically busy. I'm so sorry. I should never have regained consciousness. It was selfish of me. Oh no! We're also relieved that you're on the mend, Miss Green. Really we are. With that kind of attitude, maybe her surname should be Blue, not Green. So, you're an artist, are you, Miss Green? Oh no, I couldn't possibly claim that. I'm a fledgling artist at best. I'm a student of art, really, at the Thorndike Academy of Fine Arts. Oh my, an Academy of Fine Arts. Great Britain is such a wonderful country. Tell me, Miss Green, do you live hereabouts? Oh no, actually, I don't deserve it, but I have a little flat on Brixton Road. I see. How very interesting.
Oh, no. Is it?
Brixton is some 10 stops away on the underground from here, and Thorndyke Academy is a mere 3-minute walk from Brixton town centre. Does that matter, Mr. Sholmes? Perhaps not, but Briar Road is a far less salubrious part of town by comparison, dwelt in those of inferior means, including the maleficent Mr. Mustache. Inferior means? I suppose Suzuki-san does fit the bill. It struck me as somewhat out of the ordinary for a young fine art student to be walking in such a district. That's all. Oh, what's this? She suddenly clammed up.
Mr. Sholmes, you should be ashamed of yourself, prying into a young maiden's private affairs.
Oh dear me, do forgive me.
If you don't mind. I'm being discharged shortly, so I need to pack up my things.
Oh, yes, of course. We won't keep you. Thank you so much, Miss Green. Okay. Anything else, I guess? Let's check out some of these objects in the room. This rounded wooden figure isn't the most charming, is it?
Ah, I don't think that's a decoration, Mr. Naruhodo. It's an artist's mannequin, I believe, used when practicing sketching the human form in different poses.
Really? It's not exactly what you call a typical figure for that purpose, though, is it?
No, I suppose not. I confess I've never seen one quite so full-figured before.
Well, if you want to draw a full-figured person, it's the right tool for the job. Ah, this looks like the patient's treatment notes. Let's see. Do not feed. What is this place, a zoo?
You know, I seem to remember seeing an almost identical sign in our local park.
For the pigeons, yes. This is a person. Poor woman. I hope she hasn't read this. Yeah, that's like... What the heck? That's messed up. There are lots of bottles in that cabinet, aren't there? Do you think it's safe to keep them like that?
If you were a patient here, I'd feel sure you'd take some medicine by mistake when you were half asleep.
That is a worry, but at least the cabinet has a lock, even if it's only a flimsy-looking one.
Oh, I've no doubt you managed to unlock that somehow while you were half asleep as well.
There are limits to even what I can do when I'm half asleep, you know, Miss Susato. What's this? Rat? Mouse?
Hey, a mouse, Mr. Naruhodo, an enormous mouse.
Vermin in a hospital? That doesn't seem the best.
Well, it looks like a very healthy specimen, doesn't it? It's very plump.
I'm not sure we can say that's down to the excellence of this facility, if that's what you were thinking. Ha 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 ha. Anything else? Oh, what's this? Is this a photo of somebody? Look, there's a photograph in this frame here.
Oh yes, it's a picture of a young gentleman.
He looks to be about the same age as Miss Green, I would say. Perhaps the young woman's special someone, do you think?
My, Mr. Naruhodo, I didn't know you had a sense for matters of the heart.
Not in the least. I sincerely said the first thing I thought of. Is there Mr. Narrow Fodder here? Mr. Narrow Fodder. Narrow Fodder now? Well, if you're looking for Naruhodo, the lawyer, that's me, but... Ah, Mr. Narrow Fodder, good. This is for you. It's a message from Mr. Saucy Nutmeg. Mr. Nutmeg? Saucy Nutmeg? Oh my gosh. Send a message to me?
But why would a policeman be delivering a message from Mr. Natsume?
Exactly. What's going on? What's a Scotland Yard constable playing delivery boy at this time in the morning? Ugh, what are you waiting for? Let me see that. Oh. Well, this is most unexpected. Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes? Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes, he says. Have you not seen this note? No, how could I have? It would seem that London's criminals have no intention of letting the great detective rest. A new case calls. A case of murder, no less. We must depart at once.
Murder?
Call a cab. Time is of the essence. But the trouble is, we've yet to read Mr. Natsume's note. I was thinking we ought to pay him a visit in his lodgings once we did. That will be entirely convenient.
Convenient? What do you mean?
It's all here in the note, my dear fellows. The murder we must investigate took place at Mr. Mustache's lodgings.
Wait, what? a fiacre?
Fiacre at once. Man, I need to look up these words so I can pronounce them. Fiacre? It was only yesterday that Sosuke-san was in court and we were dispelling doubts about his innocence. And now, the very next day, there's a murder at the man's own address? He may very well be the unluckiest man alive. Or so it seemed to us at the time, but we were soon to discover it was worse than we thought. Alright, let me sip so my throat. Can warm up a bit? Okay. 21st of February, 7:18 a.m. Mr. Natsume's lodging, ground floor. Uh-oh. Oh, I remember this guy. So we only saw him briefly like once in the first game, but we didn't know his purpose at all, so.
What on earth? The gentleman is deceased without question. He's dead.
Look, a locum student, Mr. Naruhodo, Esquire.
Mr. Natsume.
Oh, why? Why is this happening? Why to me? I've only just got out of court. Yesterday, I was finally home after 2 days of misery. And then, I wake up the next day to this. No early bird should catch a worm like this. Awful worm without wiggle. I see you're in high spirits again this morning, Mr. Mustache. Not the horrible Herlock Sholmes. Shove off! Show yourself the door! I never invited you!
Mr. Sholmes came here with us. I'm quite sure he'll be able to help you, Mr. Natsume.
I'm entirely at your disposal, Mr. Mustache. What can I do for you? Here they are, already. The busybodies. Ah, Inspector Gregson. What a pleasant surprise. Pleasant, is it? Gives me heartburn every time I see your face at the crime scene, Sholmes. Ha! I deduce, Inspector, that your heartburn is a result of your excessive consumption of fried food. Good morning, Inspector. This is a crime scene. Don't you go touching anything. Or good morning to you too, Sunshine. Oh boy, okay. Well, this is interesting. Oi, I said hands off. You're gonna mess up my crime scene. Oh, no, I just wanted to look, that's all. No chance. I know your kind. You'll mess it up just by looking at it. Ugh, someone's in a bad mood. There's certainly some bad air in here, isn't there? Oh, ha 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 ha. Alright, it sounds like I'd better talk to the inspector first and try to curry some favor. Okay. So, Inspector, what was the victim's name? Who was he? Mr. William Shamspeare. He was a lodger here. As you can probably tell, he was an actor. A bit of a dead loss, as it happens. Or just dead.
Mr. Shamspeare?
Mr. Shamspeare. Ha ha ha. It was the landlord, old Mr. Gerdeb, and the other lodger, Mr. Natsume, who found him. The fella didn't rise at his usual hour, so Gerdeb got worried and kicked the door down. But doesn't Mr. Gerdeb have a bad leg? Oh, yeah, you're right there. It was that jittery Japanese hunchback over there who actually did the kicking. Really? Sosuke-san? The victim was pretty hard up, it seems. Even done some time inside for petty crimes. He had no money, no place to go, and no friends. His only acquaintances were the people in this house. Miserable life, and a miserable end to it. So, what exactly is Mr. Natsume still doing here? He's not involved in the investigation, so shouldn't you have sent him away from the crime scene? Well, I'm not saying it's because the fellow looks odd or anything, or that he acts suspicious. But I thought it would be prudent to take a statement from the culprit, cohabiter. You nearly said culprit there, didn't you?
Oh dear. Mr. Natsume appears to be under suspicion again.
It certainly seems that way. He does just come across as such an odd fellow, doesn't he?
Poor Ben. How unfortunate.
Anyway, I can't say much until the coroner gets here. But I don't think the fella's been a goner that long. The body's still warm. Even if the inspector would allow it, I don't think I could bring myself to touch a dead body. Okay. Can we look at anything else? I guess not. Not allowed to touch anything. Maybe we'll talk to Sosuke. What a terrible thing to have happened. It's only been 3 days since I was arrested for the incident on the pavement outside. And then, I'm finally regained my freedom. It starts happening all over again. Endless existence of excruciating experiences. So the victim lived here on the ground floor, and your room is just 1 story up, isn't it? Yes, that's right. In a way, we were neighbors, I suppose. So, did you know the victim? Were you friends? What's the matter with Sosuke-san now? It was an innocent enough question, wasn't it? Why does he seem so shaken by it? Well, I suppose he wasn't a complete stranger. But did he ever invite me into his room? Never. On my honor, I swear it. What an extreme reaction. You're probably wishing you never asked now, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? When we found him here, I felt wretched, which is why I sent word asking you to come. Look, that inspector over there. Hello, Mr. Sholmes, what are you doing? Mr. Sholmes, what are you doing? That's what I said. Ha! You need only observe to know it, my dear fellow. Investigating, naturally. There's nothing natural about that pose. Mr. Sholmes, have you made some miraculous discovery? Patience, my dear madam. Patience. We're not here in this room 5 minutes. So far, all I've managed to deduce is what actually happened. My goodness! But isn't that everything we need to know, Mr. Sholmes? Now that you propose the idea, I believe one could, indeed, see it that way. At the present time, I have managed to draw 2 incontrovertible conclusions. The first is that there was a physical struggle here last night, in which the victim fought for his life. Mr. Natsume, what's wrong? Is something that Mr. Sholmes said significant somehow? No. Don't mind me. Forget I was here. And my second conclusion is that there was a poison lingering in the air here last night that passed the victim's lips. Nonsense! Alright, Mr. Natsume, why are you reacting so extremely to Mr. Sholmes' seductions? No, please, pretend I'm not here. Invisible, ineffable, inscrutable, insignificant. Impossible to ignore.
You must tell us everything, Mr. Sholmes. Spare no detail.
But of course, let the theatrical tragedy before us be unraveled by my great deductions, presented for your pleasure in 2 acts. We had heard some truly astounding great deductions from Mr. Sholmes in the past. No doubt this will be no exception. What miracles will unfold before our eyes this time? So, my dear fellows, for your delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Herlock Sholmes' Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. The Great Deduction. The game is afoot. Cause of death. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Foam at the mouth of a deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate, which contains, you will observe, 1/2 of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful? Indubitably. Why is this soap set so perfectly upon the dish, like the victim's last supper? In fact, yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. It appears that the young man's appetite was his undoing. Taking up arms in the form of his cutlery, the victim engaged in a deadly battle for his life. Yet the struggle against his hunger was in vain, for in the end he couldn't resist devouring the slippery feast. But the London's foul soap was besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by the poison that tainted the contents of the plate. The soap and the lather around the young man's mouth are 2 perfectly matched to ignore. The cause of the death was clearly intoxication due to excessive indigestion of foul soap. Though personally, I have a greater interest in the taste of foul candle wax, of course. Poisoning from soap, indigestion. Suicide or murder. Cause of death identified. We proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall that the death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? This single teacup suggests the answer. To draw a conclusion on such a meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. The careful criminal could have absconded with his own cup to cover his tracks. Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. Though forced open now, at the time of the incident, this door was locked. And the sole key was in the victim's pocket. In other words, when the victim consumed the poison, he must have been alone. Alone with his inferior soap, from whence wafted an inferior scent. And with that acrid aroma lingering in the air, the victim met his end, in tragic solitude. We can take comfort in only the fact that his soul was well cleansed on its way to the hereafter. No possible perpetrator present. This concludes the final act of Sherlock Holmes's Great Deduction. What a silly, silly man. There's just one thing, Mr. Sholmes. You're disposed to identifying just one thing, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Pray, what concerns you? Well, no matter how hungry he was, do you really think the man would have eaten soap? It's quite apparent that this man had barely a penny to his name. It is a curious thing, but to one so destitute, soap can suddenly appear quite irresistibly appetizing.
How extraordinary.
In truth, I've tried a little soap myself in the past. Okay.
You've eaten it, you mean?
My dear fellow, it was some time ago now. My postulation was that it would cleanse my gut. And did it? As I arrived in agony on the floor and spilt the contents of my stomach, yes, I believe it did. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Soap is quite poisonous. It has an unpleasant taste and leads to great discomfort. In summary, I cannot recommend it. Believe me, I wouldn't eat it even if you did. There's something that troubles me as well, actually. Oh? What's that? It's Mr. Natsume. Well, I couldn't help but noticing him shuddering and quivering out of the corner of my eye. It was almost as if Mr. Sholmes' deduction touched a nerve somehow. Nonsense. Well, that clenched teeth episode didn't last.
I think, judging by Mr. Natsume's reaction, the great detective's deduction may need some gentle correction in order to reach the actual truth.
Yes, Mr. Sholmes' observations and deductions are sometimes a little too sharp. He has a tendency to hit the nail on the side of the head and drive it in at an obtuse angle. When he does that, it falls to us to straighten things out. Alright then, let's see what we can do.
Yes, we must pick out the keywords in Mr. Sholmes' quite brilliant deductions. And discreetly exchange them for something that makes a little more sense. If we can do that, I'm sure we'll arrive at what Mr. Sholmes meant to say in the first place.
In that case, are you ready for the second performance of the day? Once again, my dear fellows, for your continued delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Sherlock Holmes's Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Bum ba dum bum bum. Course correction. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. So this is all the information we just went over. Foam at the mouth. And the soap. The fork. Well, you can't deny that the fork implies that the man was eating something, or about to eat something.
Yes, that's true. If I were to decide to eat some soap, I would used to prefer a fork than to attempt it with chopsticks.
And of course, only half of the bar of soap is left on the plate.
But might there not be some other explanation? Something material that proves whether or not the man really ate some soap.
Well, this is here, so he must have not eaten it, right? Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the other piece of soap reveals the answer. It being the other half of the soap on the table. In short, the victim was not eating soap at all. But it's obvious, really. For no depths of hunger could drive any man to attempt to eat soap. Even I, with my unquenchable thirst for practical knowledge, took only a single bite. But that begs the question of how the man was poisoned, because there's no sign of any food on the table. An excellent observation, Mr. Naruhodo, and one that furnishes us with the answer we seek. For London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. That must be like... from the way they're talking about it, it must be true. Like, I guess in the past, the soap used to be really poisonous, which is interesting. Mr. Sholmes is still pushing the soap argument, then. Perhaps he's suggesting that the man licked the soap rather than ate it. If soap alone is that poisonous, I don't think I want to be washing my hands with it. There are no signs of food in this room at all.
Of course, food isn't the only thing that passes people's lips, is it?
The victims of life was claimed by poison by the tainted contents of the plate. The teacup? Okay, I guess we're pointing to the teacup, right? Where could that poison have been laced? Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison, and that tainted the teacup. Indeed, cups have been the vessel of choice for practicing poisoners over the centuries. And it would appear that this victim drank every last straw. There's no sign of food anywhere in the room. Which leads us to the immutable conclusion. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to the ingestion of poison contained in this teacup. Poison in the tea. Act 2. Now, was it suicide or murder? Ah, the Western vessel for infused hot drinks again. It's already featured heavily in our deduction so far.
Yes, we can imagine that shortly before his death, Mr. Champsmere was having a drink of tea. There would be nothing remarkable about that, but what troubles me is Mr. Natsume's reaction when he heard Mr. Sholmes suggest it. There's more to this deduction than it seems. We must closely examine the scene of the crime again for more clues.
2 teacups, he's holding the other one.
It's a teacup!
And it too is empty. Given that he's actually holding this one in his hand, we can assume that this is the teacup from which Mr. Champsmere was actually drinking. But if that's the case, this changes everything. Everything we've deduced up to now is turned on its head. I have a bad feeling about this, and I almost don't want to say it.
Yes, I know exactly how you feel.
Did the man dine and die alone? This other teacup suggests the answer. Yes, there are 2 teacups in this room all along.
Ugh.
In other words, this is a strong indication that, at the victim's last supper, there was a guest present. At the very least, we can now say with certainty that somebody else was here in this room last night, taking tea with the victim.
What are you talking about?
Utterly, unbelievably, unjustly, unreasonable. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. In which case, what more can we deduce about this possible guest at the table? Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Do you mean to say you know who exactly was in this room at the time of the victim's death? Indeed. What reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. I'm not sure I like where this deduction is going now. I'm afraid it's too late to go back to the halcyon days of eating too much soap. But the identity of the guest who was here last night when the victim passed away is something I have a very bad feeling about. Well, you can try to ignore your feelings, but we cannot ignore the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. No, I suppose not. Time to look around again. Someone was here last night. Empty bottle? What gives away the identity of the last night's visitor to the room? Okay, I can't scroll up or anything. Glasses, books. What would reveal the identity? Even Mr. Chancellor didn't need candles, it seems. I've already established that he didn't need soap either. Ah, do you think perhaps the guest brought the candle here last night? Even if he or she did, does it reveal anything about the guest's identity? Good point. There goes my idea, snuffed out like that candle will be. If you sigh so deeply, Mr. Naruhodo, you're in danger of blowing out the flame. It's empty. Empty of liquid, but full of air. That makes you think, doesn't it? It makes me think that you're full of hot air. We should be thinking about who was in the room at the time. Bother. Suzuki-san's quip in response was cleverer than my original riddle. At first glance, it seems that the only things in this room are the makeshift stage and the costumes. I overlooked these 3 books initially. I wonder what they are. Let's see. The titles read The Picture of Monsieur Lecoux, Canterbury Yearnings, and A Meal for Gaborio. Wait, I'm sure I've heard those titles before. It could just be an incredible coincidence, but they're the exact same 3 books that Mr. Natsume purchased the other day. What? Yes, on the day of the unfortunate incident when Miss Green was stabbed. Suzuki-san had just been to a bookshop and bought them. That's right. And now those 3 titles are here in the room of the victim. Yeah, Mr. Natsume claims never to have been here before. What does this mean, you think? I really don't know what to make of it. So obviously those are his books. Because we recognize those titles. Indeed. What reveals the answer, of course, is a pile of familiar books. Quite so. It's no mere coincidence that these 3 titles are here in this room. It's linked to the truth. Ugh. Mr. Natsume, you purchased these books 4 days ago at the secondhand bookshop. That's just a coincidence. In that case, you'll be able to bring the same 3 titles from your own room, will you not? This very moment. No, never, not negotiable. If you can't bring your own copies here, it proves that these 3 books are in fact yours. Having purchased the books 4 days ago and returned to your lodgings, you were arrested the very next day. So you could conceivably have brought the books here on that evening, but you never mentioned that. In other words, you could only have brought these 3 books here to the victim's room. Dancing all the way. Last night, having returned to your lodgings after the trial concluded at the Old Bailey. In short, there's only one possible conclusion. The victim died here in this room last night as a result of poisoning. And that same night, the victim had a visitor. And that visitor was you, Mr. Suzuki Natsume. Thus concludes the final act of Sherlock Holmes' Great Deduction. Suzuki and Natsume at the scene. Dun dun dun. Deduction complete. Elementary.
Not again. Not again. Not again. Not again. Well then, Mr. Natsume. It would appear you're gonna have to accompany me down to the yard. Again. But wait! Hold your horses! Yes? Door, key, locked, entry, exit, entirely impossible. He's so flustered, he's being even stranger than normal. What? You think that's an alibi? You could have just made a copy. What? You live in the same building after all. You had plenty of opportunity, I'm sure. Misery me! Sorry, sir. You'll get your chance to give your side of the story later. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Mustache. You horrible warlock Sholmes! Really has found himself an arch rival now, hasn't he? Come on now, no dilly-dallying. Outside, there's a carriage waiting. Welcome to Mr. Naruhodo, Esquire. I never imagined I'd be in this position again, but... You have to help me. Please, please. I'm innocent. Alright, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it. One more thing. Oh, yes? My poor little kitty cat. Give him his breakfast for me. And so, his evil curse, still apparently unbroken, Sosuke-san found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. You know how awful that would be? You're a foreign student in like a foreign land where there's like literally nobody else who speaks the same language as you, and then you get tried for murder, and then it happens again. Thanks to the incriminating deduction of the great detective. My dear fellow, what honor belongs to you? That honor belongs to you. Alright, just gonna take a sip here. Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Yes, that's right. Ah, and of course. What? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Garrideb, who discovered Mr. Shakespeare. Ah, Mr. Garrideb, yes. I expected we should find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right. We must remember to go and talk to him later, then. Alright. Let's take a look around. This is a gas wall light, isn't it? It must be connected to a gas pipe in the wall. Gas lights. A gas stove? London really is a city of gas. But now that I think about it, Mr. and Mrs. Garrideb had an open fire on the top floor, didn't they? Oh yes, you're right. I don't recall seeing a gas stove up there. Well, I much prefer a real fire anyway. It's so much cozier. What's this? Oh, the gas thing. And here we have another disproportionately large machine. This looks like a meter of some kind. Ah, this is a gas meter, I think. It seems that in this district, residents pay for gas as they use it with coins. Ah, I see. Yes, now you've pointed it out. I can see that there's a slot here, just here, that looks like it would take a coin. So you mean, if you put a coin in here... That's right. That would buy you about 2 hours of gas for lights and heating. So, if you were a poor person with no money, you would have to sleep in the freezing cold? Yes, or if you were a scatterbrain with no change because you forgot to exchange your money at the bank. Thank goodness there's no meter in our office. As is seen from the outside, the window is completely bricked up. The vestiges of the former window tax that Britain had to pay. What strange things they used to tax in Great Britain. I mean, making people pay for the number of windows they had in a property? It's extraordinary. It's heartbreaking to think of the poor having to block up their windows just to avoid an unaffordable tax. Oh! What is it, Miss Susato? If you look closely, a number of the bricks are loose. Oh, interesting. Oh, yes. It looks as though an amateur has broken out a few of them just there. Was it Mr. Shakespeare who did, I wonder? Being a lodger renting this room. Oh, look at this, Mr. Naruhodo. On the outside, there's a little ledge. And there's something on it. What, outside?
Soap?
Ah, it's so cold outside. You can feel it through this gap.
It did snow all last night. It would be cold. But more importantly, what is it on the ledge out there? What are those snow-covered lumps?
It's more bars of soap.
Soap? What are these bars of soap doing lined up on a ledge outside the window?
I have no idea.
But the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, that's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined outside the window. I think perhaps we should take one. There are two after all.
Oh dear, I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Look here at this soap.
Ah,
Do you see in the middle there? There's a patch that's a different color. It's sort of transparent, but
some sort of fancy design, I suppose. Only in Great Britain.
looks like the Hinomanu flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful. That's probably a very expensive brand.
Expensive? Then what's it doing in this ramshackle old room? Bar of soap. A cheap bar of soap that was discovered just outside Mr. Shams's window. It's one of the two that were found there. Interesting. Let's take a look at our our stuff that we have right now. Secondhand book receipt. A receipt of some books that Mr. Natsume purchased at the secondhand bookshop. It was submitted as evidence in trial the other day. Okay, so this is the same as the note from the trial that they're talking about, but yeah, the names of the books that he had bought from the bookstore. Nearby street map. A street map of the neighborhood where Mr. Natsume had his lodgings. It was submitted as evidence in the trial the other day. So we are also familiar with this as well from the previous game.
This part is a different color. It's quite an exquisite design, isn't it?
Trust the British to turn a boring bar of soap into something special.
I quite like it. It reminds me of the Hinomanu design of the Japanese flag. I expect this is rather expensive soap.
That doesn't seem likely, given who it belongs to. It is very strange. I wonder what that is. Olive Green, an art school student whose ambition is to become an artist. She just regained consciousness, having been comatose for days, after suffering a stab wound to the back. Sosuke Natsume, a Japanese scholar sent to London to further his research into the English language. He's just been acquitted of a very serious crime, but now finds himself accused of another. Tobias Gregson, the detective inspector in charge of Scotland Yard's investigation of the case. He's discerning and single-minded in his approach, and a great lover of fish and chips. William Shamspeare, the victim of the current case, a failed actor renting a room in the same building as Mr. Natsume's lodgings. Okay. Let's keep looking around. Look at these extravagant bright costumes. Somehow, they look out of place in this room, with its grim, shady goings-on.
This one looks like a king's attire.
A king? I've always dreamt of being a king.
Oh, I think you'd be more suited to a feudal lord. A daimyo or such like.
With a chanmage topknot? Every Japanese man wishes he had a chanmage. Chanmage, probably.
Oh, you look wonderful in one, and you already have the sword.
Can you imagine what would happen if I walked around the streets of London with a chanmage and a sword? Ha 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 ha.
There's not much on these shelves, is there? Just this wine glass and bottle. And both of them are cracked.
Yes, not much use, are they? What's the matter?
Oh, I was just reminded of the Reaper, that's all.
Prosecutor Lord Van Zeeks?
Yes, he's always so reckless with his wine glasses. I was just thinking it's a waste and that he should donate some to the needy.
You can suggest it next time we meet. Oh, there's something on the floor. What the heck is that?
What's this?
Looks like a part of an envelope, I think.
Yes, I think you may be right. Perhaps it was torn off when the letter was opened.
Is that significant?
Well, it's a little out of place, perhaps. When you look around the room, there's no sign of a letter or the rest of the envelope, in fact, is there?
Ah, she's right.
And yet, here, we have the torn off end of an envelope. It just strikes me as unusual.
I agree. We'd better take this, just in case. The torn off end of envelope. A ripped piece of envelope that was found in Mr. Shamsier's room. The rest of the envelope could not be located. Strange.
Ah, one of the teacups that Mr. Shamsier and his guests drank from last night. But don't go drinking from them, Mr. Naruhodo. There's bitter poison inside. I'm not planning on drinking any, don't worry. Anyway, the cups are both empty. That's true. So, one was Mr. Shakespeare's, and the other must be the cup that Mr. Natsume was drinking from. But Soseki-san wasn't poisoned, of course. Perhaps we should take these so we can examine them in more detail later. The pair of teacups. The teacup used by Mr. Shakespeare and Mr. Natsume. The one with the green line around the rim was Mr. Natsume's. Looks like you're having a good snoop around, eh? Inspector Gregson, back so soon? After I threw that little Japanese fella in the clink, I went to report this to the investigation division. In 5 minutes' time, this place will be cordoned off by the yard. Oh, I see. Well, we'd better be leaving then. Poor Mr. Natsume must be feeling very low. Back in being a cell again so soon? I'm sure. We should probably go. And... Oh, what's wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? Yeah. Oh my freaking gosh. Ouch. Ouch, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow. A poor player. That struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Now, how soundeth the next part? It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Indeed. Oh, happy day. Oh my gosh. What? Walking Dead! Oh my goodness, he's alive! Holy moly! I guess even death is no match for Shakespeare. You are right. The fella isn't dead at all. What was that nonsense he was saying, though? I think, yes, it's from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. A soliloquy from Act 5, Scene 5. Shakespeare. So it was that the victim, Mr. Shakespeare, came back to life. But the man had indeed been poisoned. It transpired that it hadn't killed him. He was taken by emergency carriage to a nearby hospital for treatment. And Inspector Gregson evicted us from the scene of the crime, whatever that now was.